The history of baseball. Traditions of America's pastime. A story that cannot be told without talking about the Negro Leagues. While some Negro League players made history on the field, all of them share an important place in America's record books. From the legends of the game to baseball's forgotten heroes. This is the history of Negro League baseball.
When visitors come here to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, they will oftentimes hear me emphatically relate stories that were told to me by my good friend, the great John Jordan Buck O'Neil. It's hard to put in perspective Buck's place, not just in the work that he did to build the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, but his place in baseball history. Arguably the greatest ambassador this sport has ever seen. He was a tireless advocate for the game of baseball, be it Negro Leagues, be it Sandlot, Major Leagues, it didn't matter. Buck was out there promoting our sport, unlike any that I think has ever been involved with this sport. His baseball career, illustrious in his own right, 7 decades in the game. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact of just how good a player Buck O'Neil was. Buck O'Neil was an outstanding baseball player who began his career in the Negro Leagues in 1937 with the Memphis Red Sox. In 1938, he was traded to our Kansas City Monarchs, and it's a great story. He was traded for a guy who became a legendary basketball player. Great trivia question. The answer to that trivia question is Goose Tatum. Goose Tatum would replace Buck O'Neil in Memphis at first base. Buck O'Neil would come to Kansas City, and Buck O'Neil would be a fixture in our city from 1938 until he died in October of 2006. He became our native son. Buck O'Neil was an outstanding defensive first baseman for the Monarchs, .288 lifetime batting average, line drive hitter who had some power. But at defense, they will tell you that there were very few who played defense any better than the great Buck O'Neil at first base, multiple-time All-Star, became a player, manager for the Monarchs, would of course go on to become a groundbreaking scout in the Major Leagues. So as a scout, signed Hall of Famers Ernie Banks, Lou Brock to their first professional contracts. Future Hall of Famers in Joe Carter and Lee Arthur Smith to their first professional contracts. He would go on to become the Major's first African-American coach in 1962 with the Chicago Cubs, and of course became the voice of the Negro Leagues. His epic portrayal, his narration on Ken Burns' epic documentary on the history of baseball really made Buck O'Neil an overnight sensation. He was 82 years young at that time, and Buck would always tell me, he says, "Bob, I've been telling these stories for over 40 years, and no one ever listened. Ken Burns gave him a platform, and people listened." America fell in love with Buck O'Neil, this very kind, gentle man who was telling these wonderful stories about baseball to baseball fans that they had never heard about. And he did it with a twinkle in his eye and a smile that lit up the screen. And again, America fell in love with Buck. He would, of course, live for another 12 years before he would eventually pass away. Even the work that he did in building the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and dedicating the last 16 years of his life to ensure that these heroes, I like to refer to them as America's unsung baseball heroes, would never be forgotten.
Joel, just amazing the impact.